Really thinks about the game later on in the week.
Nope.
Yes.
Love all 32. I love all 32.
Good afternoon. I'm Gassia Mikaelian.
I'm Andre Senior. We bring you a special edition of our newscast today to share the sad news that former KTVU anchor and Bay Area legend Dennis Richmond has passed away.
He was 81 years old. Dennis and the whole Bay Area was on a first-name basis with him. Spent 40 years here at KTVU. He was a fixture on TV and in people's lives. A look back now at Dennis Richmond's life and career.
In 1969, a young reporter came back to Oakland after a summer in journalism school at New York's Columbia University. Dennis Richmond was on the cusp of launching a Bay Area career that would span 40 years.
To the black community, he was hope. They could turn on and they could see there was someone who identified with us. There was someone, there was the result of why affirmative action worked.
I was working at Channel 2 as an AD.
Associate director?
Associate director, behind the camera. Right. And one of the programs that I worked on was the 10 o'clock news. And they had an opening.
Back in 1958, the 10 o'clock news on Channel 2 was founded on an original idea: lead, don't follow. Over the years, we've remained original by expanding our operations while others were cutting back, all to provide you with a full hour of serious, straightforward reporting. But that should come as no surprise. At Channel 2, it's all part of a commitment that started more than 30 years ago.
What do we remember now about the great East Bay Hills firestorm of 1991? For many of us, it's a few searing pictures and Dennis Richmond's voice telling us about it.
Pushed by 30-mile-an-hour winds, flames swept down along the Oakland-Berkeley Hills, destroying everything in its path. There are reports of as many as 10 dead. An Oakland battalion chief is among the dead. The number of injured is climbing.
The Patricia Hearst kidnapping was Dennis's story. And when Dan White shot and killed Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk, White's lawyer argued that his client just happened to have a gun with him when he went to City Hall that day in 1978. It took a sharp young journalist named Dennis Richmond to ask exactly the right question.
But I did say that other supervisors and perhaps other City Hall personnel do carry firearms presently and have carried them in the past. Yeah.
Do you know if the other people who do carry weapons also carry 10 extra rounds in their pocket?
Like I said, you don't want to show it on the air because, you know, the story is not about your emotions. It's about the story. And, you know, those emotions come out later.
By the way, Dennis doesn't broadcast his personal life, and neither will we. But just to give you the basics, he has a wife, a daughter, a stepson, a house in an East Bay suburb, and a large dog. He works out daily, plays a little tennis, takes a lot of vitamins, and likes to watch nature shows on television.
Another news tonight, campus police at Cal State Hayward.
Davis says Richmond's legacy lies in his no-frills delivery.
He sticks with giving me the facts of the story, and in a way that is without emotion, that would make me sway my opinion one way or the other. And I don't think that there is, they say, turning him out like Dennis anymore.
I had role models. Many of them were not in broadcast journalism. Belva, of course, was the primary reason that I got into broadcasting. And of course her husband Bill, he and I worked together for many years. And of course the most important role model of all was my mother before she passed. You know, everything that I've done in life was through her inspiration.
Good evening. I'm Julie Hayner.
And I'm Dennis Richmond.
It's a legacy that those who know Dennis Richmond say will go on long after the lights go down on his final broadcasts.
I remember this all the years that we did this, and you never get over it. It's so much fun.
This is
It feels so good when people act like they like me.
We don't like you. What are you doing?
Dennis, come on. I look at some of these anchors who have retired and they won't let go. And I let go. Oh, God, I miss the viewers.
Dennis, you're one of a kind. You're a treasure. So many people love you. You're so beloved in the Bay Area. And to get here and to be able to sit next to you, you're like an icon. And to learn from you and to have such a great working relationship with you, so professional, and like you said, so prepared.
Yeah.
It was just an honor. And we had a really good time working together.
We did.
I know so many people miss you, and it's so good to have you back here with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back. I feel like, with all these folks here, I feel like I haven't left.
I'm being told in the old year, right, Dennis? Remember when you get the rap? Yeah.
We're getting the rap.
We keep talking during commercial.
Yeah, but you know what? I can ignore it.
You can.
I get a rap, but I can ignore it. Who's going to tell me to get off the air? I will truly miss speaking to you twice a day, Monday through Friday, from this set in the KTVU studios. It's been truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience that happily for me lasted 40 years. So for the last time, was with great joy and great sadness that I say good night and goodbye.
So good just to hear his voice again, especially upon hearing the news this morning. If you're just joining us, we have just received word that longtime legendary KTVU anchor Dennis Richmond has died earlier today. We'd like to talk now with one of the people who worked with him most closely for the longest amount of time. We welcome former KTVU anchor Julie Hayner to the Noon here. Julie, you were so instrumental in bringing him back to the station even after he'd signed off. What are you thinking today?
Oh, gosh, yeah, Andre. You know, I got the news just a little bit ago, and, of course, just heartbroken. You know, Dennis, we all love Dennis. Dennis was, you know, meant so much to the Bay Area and Bay Area news, and I had been fortunate enough to see him a couple of months ago, almost exactly 2 months ago, and he had suffered a heart attack and a really bad fall at his home in Grass Valley, and he was in the hospital, and he was hanging on, and I got together with Bill and Mark, and we drove up to visit him, and just to see him and spend time with him, it was really good to be near him, and, you know, he was a fighter. He hung on for as long as he could, and, you know, I have to take a minute. It's just, we worked together so closely for a long time, and just to say, you know, how much Dennis was respected and meant so much to the Bay Area, you know, you can't say enough. I think this news is going to hit people really hard, and I just want to say what an honor it was to work alongside him for many years. When I first came to Channel 2, it was 1997, and Dennis was, even back then, you know, legendary. He was iconic, no nonsense, you know, straightforward. He had, like, just a larger-than-life, you know, feeling. When you met him, he was almost intimidating. But once you got to know him, and when I came in, he was, I think, wanting to see that, you know, I could work hard and you know, get the stories right and go out and do things that mattered and deliver the news. And I earned his respect. And then when I got to anchor with him, we got to start the 6 o'clock news together in 2000. I was anchoring on weekends alone, and I got named the co-anchor with him in 2000. And it's when we just had the 10 o'clock news back then. We had mornings on 2, and we had the noon, which you guys are doing now, and then we had the 10 o'clock news, and KTVU decided to start a 6 o'clock newscast, and I got to anchor alongside him, and, you know, he was such a good partner. He was such a voice of calm and reasoning when, you know, some of the biggest stories broke around the Bay Area, and I think, you know, I think back over his career, 40 years, and just kind of, he only worked at Channel 2. He started in 1976 behind the scenes and loved journalism. And they sent him to school at Columbia to learn how to be a newscaster and how to report and how to be a reporter and cut his teeth. And he covered some of the biggest stories like the East Bay Hills firestorm and the Loma Prieta earthquake, and the Patty Hearst story was his story. He was all over that. And the assassinations of former San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and Dan White. And Dennis loved Channel 2. He was a voice of reason when there was terrible things happening, and people, I think, over the years just resonated with him. And it was before social media, when everybody watched the news and they would turn to Channel 2 and to Dennis Richmond and get their news. So I think this news is going to hit people really, really hard. He's going to be greatly, greatly missed. And I can't say enough about his wife, Deborah. My heart breaks for her. She has been an angel by his side through so much. He's been battling so many health issues since he retired back in, I think it was 2008, right at his 65th birthday. And Dennis and his daughter, Amber, Dennis had a stepson and his daughter, Amber, and 2 grandchildren. And recently they had talked about maybe moving back to be closer, because they used to live in San Ramon for many years, maybe moving back to San Ramon or to the East Bay so they could be closer to his grandchildren, their grandchildren. And that fall back in December was really, really hard. And he hung on, and he was a fighter. And it's just really, really sad to hear about his loss today.
Julie, I wonder, you can work with someone for many, many years and not be as close a friend as you were to Dennis. What bonded you to him and caused you to remain friends with him for so many years after he retired?
You know, Andre, I think we just had such a great working relationship, and to be able, for me, coming in when I was younger, to come in and work with someone who was so respected, so established. I mean, Dennis really made my career, to be able to work alongside him and to be considered. He respected me, and we had a mutual respect to each other. And I think working with someone who you can do some of your best work with, and to work alongside someone. And Dennis came across as no nonsense and intimidating and as strong and stoic, but he had such a soft spot. I got to work with him. We got to know each other better over the years. He would get emotional, when we would do stories about things that happened to children. And I could see him tear up at times, and being with someone that carries on. And even when he left, we remained friends, and we would, talk once in a while. And his wife, Deborah, is just such a dear. And then when I retired back in June, thanks to Mark Abanias and some people there at Channel 2, they surprised me. I had no idea on my last night that he was going to show up, and he did. So it was just that was such a great moment to be able to have him come back and to see him. And I think when he gets, I heard when you guys, right before you talked to me, some of that moment when he was back at Channel 2 and sitting at the anchor desk, he really, I think, when he thought about it, he's like, I kind of wish I didn't retire. He wanted to work a little bit longer because he loved doing the news. And he had a fun personality. He cared about people, and it was really special, the bond that we had. It wasn't just at work, it was outside work, and that really means so much to me.
Well, Julie, I feel like we could listen to you talk about Dennis for hours, and I wish we could. We'll have to leave it here. I appreciate your joining us as we are remembering and honoring a legend here in the Bay Area. Dennis Richmond, again, we've learned today, died earlier this morning. He was 81 years old. Julie said it, Dennis loved Channel 2. As much as people loved Dennis, Dennis loved them back. And it was so nice to have Julie and others kind of always bring him back. He was always welcome. The door was always open for Dennis. Always open.
He loved Channel 2, and he loved the work that he did, too. When you hear the stories about how much effort he put in to his work on a regular basis, coming in early, hanging with the meetings, double-checking scripts to make sure the facts are right.
He was in every editorial meeting. He was the first one at the table.
Yeah, so, I mean, it goes to show you how people can really see the work come across the screen as well. We'll continue our coverage of the special edition of the newscast at noon. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back. Today we are remembering and honoring Dennis Richmond, longtime legendary KTVU News anchor, a man who was on a first-name basis with the entire Bay Area, longtime anchor of the 10 o'clock news. We learned earlier this morning that Dennis Richmond died at the age of 81. He had very unfortunately suffered some health issues in recent years. We all remember Dennis's last night. He retired in May of 2008, and everybody, even those folks who worked on the morning show and would have no business being in the newsroom at 11 o'clock at night, we all gathered and we toasted him with champagne, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
I had to see him off, and I also want to point out the impact he made on the community. We're getting a reaction coming in right now. State Senator Jesse Adeguin, former Berkeley mayor, he said, like so many people in the Bay Area, I fondly remember growing up watching Dennis Richmond on the news. He set the standard for journalistic excellence and integrity, inspiring generations of journalists. He will be greatly missed, but never forgotten. Let's turn things over now to Joe Fonzie. He worked with Dennis for so many years. He joins us now live. First, Joe, can you share your thoughts about this passing of Dennis Richmond this afternoon?
Yeah, like so many of us, I feel just ridiculously honored that I got to spend a good portion of my career sitting at the same desk as Dennis. And it really is a throwback to a different era. When you think about the people that we always knew we could trust. Remember about Walter Cronkite, they used to call him the most trusted man in America because you knew that he was going to report the news. If you lived in the Bay Area in a certain era, you knew that about Dennis. These days, anybody who has a cell phone has an opinion. The one thing you knew about Dennis is if you heard it come out of his mouth, you knew it was researched. You knew that he cared about the information. You knew that that information was going to be accurate. And I think social media has changed the whole climate these days. It's a throwback to another era, and when I first came to the Bay Area, I was at a competing station. And anybody who spent time in the Bay Area knows that, there were the Van Ambergs of the world, there were the Dave McElhattons of the world, and then there was Dennis Richmond at KTVU. Dennis, and whether it was with Elaine Corral or Leslie Griffith or then with Julie, you knew that if information was coming across that desk and Dennis was sitting there, you knew that you could depend on that information to be accurate. And it really does signify a different era, not just in local news, but in news in general. If Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America, Dennis Richmond was the most trusted guy in the Bay Area.
Joe, you and I and so many here at KTVU were among the very lucky to be able to spend a lot of time with Dennis, not only on the air. I don't know if it's too soon, but I'm sure you have some Dennis stories that show some of his lighter moments, some of what viewers at home didn't always get to see on the news.
Yeah, Julie expressed that. Yeah. And, there was a side of Dennis that when you first came to work there at KTVU, because of his stature, you kind of treaded lightly. You wanted to say, I don't want to be the guy that he says, hey, kid, don't ever do that again. Yeah. So there was a moment there. And then when you got to know Dennis, you saw that soft side that you heard Julie talk about. He didn't just care about the information that got on the air. He cared about the people in the building. He cared about all of our lives. And then once you got to see that side of him, then he would open himself up to you as well, where you got to see that personal side of him. But there was a little test period. There's no question about it, because he wanted to see if you were as dedicated to the business as he was. And there was nobody in the building more dedicated than Dennis.
Joe Fonzie, who worked next to Dennis Richmond for so many years, sharing his thoughts on the passing of this Bay Area legend. Joe, thank you so much. We'll be hearing from you throughout the evening newscast as well. We appreciate your time. We want to turn things over now to two others who worked with them. All of you here on the desk worked with them. And if you hadn't worked with them, you heard about him, to be sure. And, what I thought was really interesting is we always say, oh, only older people watch the news, right? Well, I can tell you right now, I've got so many younger people. I had a barber that was much younger than I was that said he watched Dennis Richmond as well. Oh, yeah. And, he would have been a kid by the time Dennis retired, but he still remembers him that well. That's how much of a personality he was within this community. People knew and trusted him as well.
We have longtime KTVU reporter Jana Katsuyama, Sal Castanelso. Can I ask you, Jana, you're kind of out of the building more than the three of us get to be. Even now when I go out to do reporting, people will drive by and say, hey, how's Dennis? right, to this day.
Yes, and I think, you know, so I came in 2007, and I remember stepping into the KTVU newsroom, and, you know, really, you think about people who set the tone for a workplace, for an organization, and the culture. And I just remember it was my first week that I was working here, and I was out in the field, and I got this call from the newsroom, and it was Dennis. And he was calling to ask me how to pronounce the name of a person in the story, and just asking questions about the facts of the story. And that was something that made such an impression, because it showed how what a lot of people couldn't see, they see him presenting the news, but it was all the work that was behind that he was doing on a very, very granular basis to try and make sure that whatever product we put out, whatever went through his lips, that it was accurate. And that's something that, you know, being out in the field, you see that love and that appreciation so many times when people would say, hey, how's Dennis? Or, you know, even before when he was still on air, oh, I saw that thing that he was saying, you know, that he reported on this this issue. And it's that kind of the personal connection, but also that weight of understanding that your words matter and that that is important.
Yeah. Sal, we talk about journalists who grew up watching Dennis Richmond, and him being the inspiration for the work that they went into, the reason they went into journalism. You grew up in the Bay Area watching Dennis Richmond, and then, you know, at some point you were on the other end of when he was tossing it out to you in the field. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, pardon me. You know, my dad, who is no longer with us, liked my career very much, but the first time that Dennis Richmond tossed to me, he had a VHS tape rolling, right? Yeah. Because I had somehow made it, because we grew up watching Van Amberg on Channel 7, Pete Wilson on Channel 4, and then we settled on Dennis Richmond. And you can't, if you grew up in the Bay Area, you can't explain what a mythical figure. I mean, there's wallpaper about the man in some of these places.
He's in fiction books, like, as you know, authors have written him into their stories.
Right. So Garcia, I don't know. You grew up here too. Yeah. Do you remember the first time he tossed it to you? And how you thought that, oh my God,
I have made it.
Dennis Richmond just tossed it to me.
Right. The first time I anchored with him, I don't think he looked at me. The whole newscast, and I think it took like 3 or 4 times together. And then my dad remarked, he goes, he looked at you this time. And I said, Dad, Dennis is serious business. Right. He is focused on those stories, focused on the people that those stories are being told about. It was incredible. Yeah. What an honor. What an honor.
And he would routinely call reporters to ask questions. He called me a few times about a story I was doing, and he wanted to get it right.
Made us all kind of stand up a little straighter.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, the stories you hear from folks that worked with him is the fact that, you know, Julie even said it herself, you wanted to make sure you were also going to work as hard as he was putting in the effort as well to make sure that the 10 o'clock news remained the signature newscast that it was for so many decades, and that it is for so many decades here in the Bay Area. Yeah. We'll continue our coverage of the passing of legendary KTVU anchor Dennis Richmond, passing away at the age of 81 today. We'll have much more coverage right after this. Welcome back to our special coverage of the passing of KTVU anchor Dennis Richmond, passing away at the age of 81. Even if you're not from the Bay Area, if you've been in the Bay Area for any amount of time, you've heard the name Dennis Richmond. He was an anchor here for 40 years, working his way up through the ranks to become the 10 o'clock news anchor and most trusted name in those who delivered the news. He is the name that people remember perhaps the most across any demographic here in the Bay Area. People will remember his time here, and so we're recognizing the impact he had. And we're joined now by Sarah Seidner. She is currently an anchor for CNN and a former anchor here at KTVU who worked along Dennis. Sarah, thank you for joining us this afternoon. First of all, I want to hear your thoughts about the passing of Dennis.
I came to KTVU in 2004, and when you walked into the doors of KTVU, people had been there for decades. And Dennis was this huge icon. He was a legend. And so you sort of knew that you needed to have his approval at some point to come into what I have always called the KTVU family, and to be welcomed into the family and be part of the family. And Dennis was a tough bird, man. He was a tough dude. He made sure that you were journalistically sound. He wanted to make sure that you were going to be fair, that you were going to be correct, accurate. And he was a stickler for really sticking with the facts and telling the best story that you possibly could, with all facts intact, with emotion, with honesty, with integrity. And he didn't pull any punches. He made sure, like, if he did not like something or if he didn't think something was right, you knew about it. He made me a better journalist. Yeah. He made us better people. He was so much fun. He would rib people, and he would take a lot of ribbing. We had a lot of jokes in that newsroom. I used to tease him because, Dennis worked out a lot in his time, right? And so he would come in all puffed up and like he had just gotten done doing his thing, working out, and I'd be like, "What's up, chicken legs?" And he would give me this look that if looks could kill, I would be dead. Yeah. He was such a joker. But most of all, he was good people. Yeah. And he came to that station in the 60s, in 68, if I'm not mistaken. Do y'all know what's going on in 1968? Yep. You had the assassination of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy also. And so this is a man who grew up with the traumas of this country and the difficulties of being a Black man at that time, and also being someone who people had to look up to when Black folks were really treated very, very poorly. And he had to show that he wasn't just good, but that he was the best. Yeah. And he maintained that throughout his career. So when you felt love from Dennis, and when you got recognition from Dennis as a young journalist, you left there puffed up like he was. You left there feeling really mighty good. Dennis has done so much for so many, not just because he was there, because that was huge, but because he was engaged in the community and he made sure his presence was felt in the best possible way. He also loved himself some golf. Yeah. I know him and Mark Richardson would get out there in those links, and that was their happy place. Yeah. But I loved him. I loved him like a brother, like an uncle. I loved him like family, and he loved us back. Yeah. And for that, I am forever grateful for having the opportunity to work beside him and be called a friend. He was an incredible human being, never mind journalist, father, husband, and member of the community. He cannot be replaced, and he will forever be missed.
Sarah Seidner, it's Gassia here. We used to be desk mates practically in the newsroom. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I think you've so beautifully wrapped up. Your writing was always excellent. I know you're speaking from your heart here, Sarah, but you're saying what we're all feeling. So we'll let you go there. Sarah's such a busy woman. She's reported all over the world. Of course, we thought we have to talk to Sarah because she has Dennis stories that I'm sure we'll keep sharing. Sarah Seidner, thank you so much. Again, if you happen to be just tuning in here, we got the news this morning that longtime legendary, beloved KTVU news anchor Dennis Richmond Richmond died earlier today. He'd had a series of health issues since he retired in May of 2008. So we're sort of opening up this hour. This is not your typical newscast where we're getting reaction from you and we're bringing in those who worked with him longest and knew him best and, loved him the most. And so we'll have much more remembering Dennis after a very short break. Welcome back as we're taking this hour at noon here to really honor and remember former KTVU longtime legendary news anchor Dennis Richmond. We learned mid-morning that he had died in a series of health struggles, and then today we got the news sort of reverberating through the newsroom and through the community. I know so many of us here at KTVU not only grew up watching Dennis and got to work with him in our own careers. One of those is Mike Mevack, a longtime KTVU reporter and anchor here. Mike, thanks for joining us on the phone. Your thoughts upon hearing today's news?
Well, my heart goes out to Deborah and to Dennis's entire family. I'll tell a story. He popped into the station, 10 months ago, somewhat unannounced. It was around 8 o'clock at night. Not a lot of us around. But I heard he was here, so, I dropped everything, and Deborah was with him, his wife, and, we brought him into the newsroom, and we sat down and talked, and I suggested, hey, Dennis, you want to go into the studio? We'll continue our conversation in there. And, he said, yeah. And so we walked, through where the sports department is, out by the loading dock, into Studio A. The house lights were down, and just talked about his career. And he talked about how he didn't want to retire when he did. He wished he worked a couple more years. But he would also talk about how proud he was of what he did and what he built in that studio. And he also talked about how proud he was that I was in his chair now. And that's a moment I'll never forget. And to tell that story, to have it, give it some context, you know, I got to go back. Like, our friendship's just not 20 years. I mean, my friendship with him goes back 35 years, you know, as a kid growing up here. And Wilmer Prieta hit 89, and, you know, broadcast news was a stranger to me up until that moment. So I started watching, and you flip the channels, and you just land on two. You land on Dennis, you know. He's a magnet, right? I was gripped from that day on, you know, no nonsense, get to work, tell the story. Yeah. And a great storyteller he was, and off I went, you know, inspired to have this dream of being a reporter one day, number one, and then maybe, just maybe, come back to the Bay Area and do it at 2. And to do it at 2 and come back and work with Dennis for those last couple of years was truly an honor. And I just owe everything that I have today to him and his guidance and his inspiration. And when I was offered the job for the evenings, I'll tell you, like, you know, it was about 3 years ago, and I told the bosses I wasn't going to accept it just yet. I had something to do. And I remember it vividly that day because I was working mornings with you, Garcia, and my daughter had a softball game that night, and I walked out to the outfield during the game, and I called Dennis. I said, hey, man, you're not going to believe this, but they want me to do your job, but I'm not going to take it unless I have your blessing. And if I don't have your blessing, I'm not going to do it. I'm happy. I'm happy working mornings. And he gave it to me, and he said he was grateful that I asked him, and he said, Mike, you have my blessing, and I wish you nothing but the best. Just remember to be honest to yourself, honest to your family, and honest to the viewers.
Mike, I wonder, the fact that you're sitting working on the newscast that he made so popular, what did it mean to you, and what does it mean to you now to continue the work that he started? He made the 10 o'clock news popular, and you're sitting in that job continuing the work that he does today.
Well, Andre, it's just an honor. I mean, I don't take it lightly. Every day I walk into that station, and you see the words KTVU on the building. It starts from that moment. Every night I walk into the studio, I say a quick prayer to my parents to ask them to be with me during the newscasts, and then I also ask Dennis for his guidance. You know, there's images in the loading dock, and his image is still up there. That's how much he meant to me. And every day I come to work thinking about those first editorial meetings I was in with him when I started working nights as a reporter. I mean, Dennis would not talk to me. Like, he did not. He was like, who are you? Like, who is this kid? Like, I'm not talking to you. And that lasted for months. I would say almost like 6-7 months. You had to earn his respect. And I had no problem doing that. I loved the challenge. I respected him, and now I needed to get his respect. And it took a while, but we got it. And to answer your question, yeah, every day. His professionalism in the newsroom, the way he handled himself in the editorial meetings. To this day, I go out to that studio 10 minutes early strictly because Dennis Richmond always left his desk at around 9:48, and he was sitting down in that chair by 9:50, knowing he had that 10 minutes just to do whatever he did mentally to get ready to deliver that 10 o'clock news to the Bay Area.
Well, Mike, I hate that we have to talk under these circumstances. I appreciate your sharing your thoughts on the air. I know you and I have talked for countless hours just in the newsroom about what Dennis meant to us, means to us, will continue to mean for us. So, Mike, thank you. I know you're coming into the newsroom here a bit later on, but it was nice. It was nice to be able to hear from him and really to understand, you know, how seriously we, seriously, and like, you know, when Mike said Dennis didn't look at me in the editorial meetings, I was like, yep, I thought I was the only one, but it was kind of that initial, you know, let's make sure that we're doing it right here before anything.
You have to think, though, for the folks who say that, he made them better.
110%.
You had to work, you had to live up to the expectations, and really what Channel 2 has become, the 10 o'clock news became, is because of that hard work that he put into making sure that there was a lot of honesty going into that newscast, a lot of fact checking, and I think that's what came across to so many other people.
Yeah.
Mike,
I feel like you, but we're grateful for him, and we will celebrate his career and his life.
Absolutely. Mike, thank you. I kind of feel like Mike and I used to be the kids in the newsroom, right? and we kind of came in toward the tail end of Dennis Richmond's career. We have two longtime beloved, I guess I have to call you a former KTVU reporter, Rob Roth. Rob Roth recently retired. Amberly holding it down at KTVU for so long now. You both knew Dennis, worked with him for decades. Rob, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, first, when I started, I mean, Dennis was such a big star in this Bay Area, probably the biggest name in news in the whole region. So when I first got hired back in 1984, all my friends, all they wanted to know was, what's Dennis Richmond? What's Dennis Richmond really like? And to be quite honest, you know, to meet him for the first couple of times, it's a little intimidating. He's such a big presence and a lot of charisma. And it could have been a movie star or an athlete, at least we looked. And he kind of, you had to prove yourself to him. You know, he gave you a fair chance, but he wasn't going to, you know, embrace you until he could see if you had game. And that was really important to him. And, you know, if you didn't, it was going to be tough sledding to get along with Dennis. But if you did, you know, you were in, and it was a great feeling. I mean, he was a really, really good newsman. Really good newsman, and he really cared.
Amber, you had been on the 10 o'clock news for a long time as well, worked with Dennis throughout the years. First, let us know your thoughts about learning the news about what happened.
First of all, for me and our entire newsroom, this is a very hard day. I still remember, you know, like many of our viewers, I grew up watching Dennis. My whole family watched Dennis. So when I was brought in to work here, it was an incredible honor. Yes, I was in awe of him, just like everybody else. But he warmed up really fast. He encouraged me to go after the really tough stories. He had high standards, like Rob, you know. The expectations were high. He expected professionalism. The story was first. Don't be afraid to go after the tough stories. He was such a presence, larger than life. What he expected of you, he was himself. I wasn't here when he was a reporter, but I saw the tapes, and it was just impressive. Taught me what journalism was all about. The story, the people, respect the people that you talk to, and they are the priority in your storytelling. And I also remembered the funny part of him. You know, he was a jokester if you got to know him, but it took a while. He would often tease me and Sarah Seidner. We had the pleasure of all working together. He made it feel not like work. Sure, it was work, and it was tough work, but because how he interacted with us, it was family. I truly mean it when we say we are a KTVU family. I spend most of my time here more than with my own family. And my family would often, like Rob said, ask me about what's Dennis like. He is like what you see on the air and a lot more. And one thing I remember was even after retirement, he came up to me and he told me, Amber, I'm still driving towards Channel 2 in the afternoons out of habit, and it stuck with him for a while. So I know how much this place, this job, the people meant to him. It was more than just a job.
That's 40 years. That's that natural pull.
Yeah, he said, oh my God, I'm still, you know, headed that way automatically. So that told me a lot.
We were so lucky to have him, you know, in the newsroom. He came to the Chinese New Year parade just a handful of years ago. He was very much still part of our newsroom, part of our lives here. We have to, I hate to even take a break, but we have to. We have more remembering and honoring Dennis after a short break, so stay with us.
As we remember the passing of Dennis Richmond at the age of 81 today, we want to welcome in to the show here Ken Wayne, who worked alongside Dennis for so many years. Ken, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Your reaction first to this passing and all the decades that you worked next to him.
Yeah, Andre Garcia, thanks for having me. I'm almost speechless. I've seen what everybody has had to say up to now, and they're all 100% correct. Once you crossed over that divide to where you gained his trust and you were in his friendship orbit, he was a different guy. He was a lot of fun. He was fantastic. It's just soul crushing to know that he's gone. And, you know, I met him when I first started there in 1991. So it's been a while. And I was able to see him Christmas Eve day. Me and my wife went up to visit him, and him and Deborah. And, you know, he obviously was not the man that I had seen when he was at Channel 2. He had been going through some health issues. But I talked to Deborah. I said, what does he really want as a treat? And she said, pumpkin pie with whipped cream. So we brought that in, and he devoured it. And we were able to chat a little bit. But, you know, as clear as health was an issue, maybe it was just misguided, but I really thought he was going to pull through. I really did, because of the guy he was that I remember, with his biceps practically tearing the suit sleeves off of his, arms. Yeah. He was such a vibrant, he's an NFL linebacker kind of guy. Look at him there. I mean, he's just, a healthy, big, strong guy. And this was when I got to go up to his house up in the Sierra Nevada foothills and spend some time talking about his career. This was about 5 or 6 years after he left the station. And I'm glad you're able to use some of the interview, because I had to push hard to get this interview. And the station they weren't really ready to do it yet. And finally, I was able to get up there and hang out with Dennis and Deborah. And it just hurts. It hurts a lot. It makes me really sad, and to see all of you and Sarah Seidner, who I sat beside with on the desk, talk about him like this. It is very painful. It's going to take a while to accept and process not having Dennis.
Ken, can I ask you for some perspective here? I sort of came in at the later part of his career, and I remember after I'd anchored with him, you and I anchored together as well, Ken, and you were always a sweetheart, right? When I anchored with Dennis, it was like all business. He hardly spoke to me, didn't even look at me. But once he warmed up, I remember saying to someone, it may have been you in the newsroom, like, oh, Dennis isn't so bad. And that person said to me, you don't know Dennis from 30 years ago. This is like sweetheart Dennis, right? Because he used to be, when I say a giant in the newsroom, he held his expectations higher than anybody. If you made a mistake, he called you out louder than anybody. I mean, there was an early Dennis, and then there was the Dennis that that most of us got to know.
The mellower Dennis, the older, mellower Dennis. Yeah. Well, let me tell you, just on that note, I was doing a live shot in the newsroom, and he was setting up the toss, and he tossed to me, Ken, and that's where I was supposed to pick it up. There's a guy's name in my story. His last name, I can't remember. It was incredibly difficult to say, almost as incredible as your last name, Garcia. Yeah. And his first name was Dan. And so I had it in my head, I got to get this guy's name right. Even though it was in the prompter, I was trying to remember how to say it correctly. So Dennis tossed to me, he goes, Ken, I go, Dan, and then I started my story, and right away I'm like, I just called Dennis Richmond Dan, live on the air, like an idiot. And I'm thinking, as I'm still reading, how am I going to fix this? And I couldn't think of a way to fix it. And then we go to the story, and we come out of it, and I toss back to Dennis correctly. And after the show, I just waited around to get what I had coming. It was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be bad. Yeah. And he came up to me, and he looked me in the eye, and he gave me a fist bump, and he goes, good job, Steve. Steve. He called me Steve.
Oh, that's the kind of story we need to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He let one slide. He let me slide one. So, I mean, but that's how you felt about it. You wanted to be at the top of your game when you're doing anything with Dennis.
Yeah. Ken, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I know he's been a big influence on your professional life as well. I could tell some of the work when you tossed to me or asked me a question while I was out in the field when you worked here. I could tell there might have been some Dennis in there as well. So we appreciate you sharing your time and the imprint that Dennis left on you as well. We appreciate it. We'll continue our coverage this afternoon of the passing of Dennis Richmond at the age of 81. We'll be back right after this break.